Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. For over 150 years, ours has been a church of open minds and loving hearts, celebrating many sources of wisdom, many spiritual paths, and many identities. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, and your hopes for our world are welcome here. Our doors are closed because our hearts are open, living our values of care and compassion for our collective health and well-being. You can still stay connected through our online services, an online coffee hour on Sundays, summer groups, and forums. You can find out more on our website or in your e-news, or contact the church and the staff if you'd like to get connected. Each week, our offering goes to support people within and beyond our church. This week, our collection will be split to support our church's mission and support members and friends in financial need through our Human Needs Fund. It's to help support groceries, rent, and more. If you or someone you know is in need, please contact the church. You can give online at uurochmn.org/give, or you can send a check made out to the church with offering in the memo line. Thank you for your generosity. And today we are glad to welcome our guest speaker, Regina Mustafa. Regina lives here in Rochester and is the founder and director of the Community Interfaith Dialogue on Islam, promoting values of diversity, inclusion, and justice. We are grateful for her reflections today and for imagining ways that we as a spiritual community can live more deeply toward a just and equitable world in solidarity with our neighbors here in Rochester and beyond. Regina, welcome and thank you. And finally, in the words of the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, minister of this church in the 1870s, may our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together.
Heart, where friends come together and share. You, yay!
Good morning. We have certainly had a lot of things going on that don't fall into that easy to talk about category. So this story today is just as much for the adults as it is for the children. Not My Idea, a book about whiteness, written and illustrated by Anastasia Higginbotham. In a 1993 interview, Toni Morrison said about racism in America, "White people have a very, very serious problem, and they should start thinking about what they can do about it." She added, "Take me out of it." When grown-ups try to hide scary things from kids, it's usually because they're scared too. Who is that? Why is that policeman screaming at him? My mom says, "You don't need to worry about this. You're safe. Do you understand?" But I don't. I don't understand because deep down we all know that color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and how you see the world. It makes a difference in how much trouble seems to find you or let you be you. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences, including which neighborhood you live in and which neighborhood welcomes you. So relieved you got here safely, my aunt said. Why wouldn't we? The protests. You may get the message that racism is happening only to black and brown people. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it, mostly by refusing to look at it. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, even your own family. Even people you love may behave that ways that show that they think they are the good ones. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it. You can bring your curiosity to learn about it and see that it's true. In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against black people for 400 years. Many white people did things they should never have done, denying opportunities, housing, voting rights, exploiting the labor and love of black women. Many other white people failed to see the problem with this. Some white people joined the leaders of the black liberation. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing and keeps being the same. And yet, just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this, to connect. But connecting means opening. And opening sometimes it feels like breaking. Mom, I don't feel good. Should I pull over? I need to know what's going on. What are you talking about? My mom asked. Why didn't anyone teach me real history? I do see colors. I do see yours, mine, and everybody's. You can't hide what's right in front of me. I know what that police officer did was wrong. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice is possible, but only if we're honest with each other and ourselves. Your history's not all written yet. What do you want to say? White supremacy has been lying to kids for centuries. White supremacy is pretend, but the consequences are real. It's important that parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody talk to kids. That doesn't mean you're bringing up something that you don't want to bring up. It just means bring it up in an age-appropriate way, or answer their questions in an age-appropriate way, because that's the only way that things are going to get uncovered and discussed and get better. Part of why we are where we are right now is because that hasn't been happening. So take some time, talk to your kids, and know that we'll get through this as long as we work on it together.
we are separated by space and time, but we are still together, and we gather in a virtual way as we continue to create a place of communal caring and connection. Be enriched by the virtual presence of each other and draw yourself into the heart of love in this time of service and reflection. In this time together, we ask that our minds be open, our hearts welcoming, our arms embracing. We honor all who support us in this caring, loving, and all-inclusive ministry. We send gratitude to Rhonda Lorenz, serving as our caring coordinator for the last week, arranging care for our members and friends in need. Vicki Wolf will take over for the next week, and we thank her for that. The members of our caring committee are wonderful examples of our compassionate community, holding us up as we go through these challenging times. And as we continue this time of staying at home, many of us may need additional care, whether it be pastoral care, grocery delivery, or an errand run, and we encourage you to reach out to Reverend Luke or myself with that request. We thank all of you who have offered to assist our members with these requests, and we send gratitude to you all for serving our congregation during this time. This morning's flowers are shared by Robin Taylor and Joe Lobel in honor of Diana Clutton Taylor. Diana passed away on June 21st. She was celebrated yesterday by a beautiful service, parts that were recorded in our sanctuary with the faces of our loving congregation smiling at Diana. In this community, we make time each week to share pieces of our lives with one another. We do this because each person here has value. Each person's experience matters. We lift up those whose lives are touched by sadness, by illness, by worry, or by loneliness. We revel in those who are celebrating joys in their lives. May their happiness lift us all. May all of us find comfort, hope, joy, and healing strength in this community. We send Bill Hendy healing thoughts this morning. Bill underwent a back surgery last week and is recuperating under the care of his children, as wife Jeannie is still recovering from cardiac surgery that she had in June. Bill is facing a fairly long recovery, and cards of support and well wishes would be welcome. We hold he, Jeannie, and the entire family in our hearts and hope for speedy recoveries. As we have over these last few months, we need to continue to reach out to all in our community to let them know we are still here and still holding and supporting them. We encourage you all to send cards and make calls to those you love and support local businesses, opening the doors of communication and community. May the faith in the spirit of life, love for the community of earth, and love for the light in each other be ours now and in all the days to come.
Wherever you are this day, I invite you to take a deep breath. Breathe deep the breath of life, and remember how precious that is. Find your breath centered down and feel below you the earth and its ancient turning. Feel above you the stars and their ancient light holding you here between alive, breathing, present. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing a few breaths of silence together. Spirit of life and source of love, God of 1,000 names and beyond all naming, there are many names we bring. God, Allah, Spirit, love, justice. We bring the names of the divine, which, if we are paying attention, we know includes our own name, broken, beloved, beautiful. May we remember that we each carry a spark of the divine, each of us alive and shining with the light of ancient stars, connecting us with all that is, each other, the world, and generations past and to come. May we find ways to remember that each day, the sacredness of our neighbor, and how we might this day, this moment, this breath, love our neighbor in solidarity, in compassion, in service, in hope. In a world that needs to ask hard questions and needs to work together toward some answers, And wherever the journey leads, may we remember it must be guided by a love that requires we travel not alone, but always together. We hold all those who suffer in mind, in body, or spirit this day. I invite you to bring the names you're holding in your own heart, in joy or in sorrow, celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all those names, spoken, unspoken, may we all be held in love and know that in this house they and you are named and known as beloved. These words of meditation come from Mother Teresa. Do not think that love, in order to be genuine, has to be extraordinary. What we need is to love without getting tired. How does a lamp burn? Through the continuous input of small drops of oil. If the drops of oil run out, the light of the lamp will cease. What are the drops of oil in our lamps? They are the small things of daily life, like faithfulness, small words of kindness, a thought for others, our way of being silent, of looking, of speaking, of acting. These are the true drops of love. Be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. May it be so, and amen. reading is This Is the Reality We Live by Orion Mountain Dreamer. This is the reality we live, aspiring to be at our best, longing for and sometimes finding meaning and connection within ourselves and with that which is larger than ourselves. And we are undone by messy bathrooms, traffic jams, and burnt toast. I'm not interested in spirituality that cannot encompass my humanness, because beneath the small daily trials are harder paradoxes, things the mind cannot reconcile, but the heart must hold if we are to live fully, profound tiredness and radical hope, shattered beliefs and relentless faith, the seemingly contradictory longings for personal freedom and a deep commitment to others, for solitude and intimacy, for the ability to simply be with the world, and the need to change what we know is not right about how we are living.
Hi, I'm Regina Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be unto you. I would like to thank members of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester and Reverend Luke for extending this invitation to me to come and to speak on the topic of injustice and just advocating for racial justice in general and societal justice and how that pertains to my practices as a Muslim. So what I hope to do today in the time that we have together is to first briefly explain some of the just basic principles of Islam and then go into how issues of justice and the notions of society standing up for, let's say, vulnerable groups or targeted groups in your society is really embedded in the Islamic tradition. I will share some verses of the Quran with you that pertain to that, and then also some sayings and traditions of the Prophet Muhammad with you as well to really explore that. And then I'll tie it back into what we're experiencing today in the United States, in Minnesota, and right here in Rochester in terms of speaking out for racial injustice and all those efforts that go with that. So first off, in Islam, as many of you may know, that the Quran is considered the holy book of Islam. Muslims believe it to be the literal word of God. So Muslims base their lives, they get their principles and their guidance mainly from the Quran. Next to that, or after that, we have the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, which are called hadith. Hadith are like sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. Also, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is also his mannerisms, his way of living, his way of dealing with certain issues, interacting with people. So we have the Quran, and then we have the Sunnah. And of course, those traditions and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad were passed down by his family and his companions. So Muslims see that, the Quran, and then you have the Prophet, which his his traditions, his life lived out what's in the Quran. Okay. So as many of you may know, there are 5 pillars in Islam. You have the Shahada, which is bearing witness in the belief that there is no God but God and in the prophethood of Muhammad. You have the Salah, the 5 daily prayers. You have Zakah, which is the obligatory charity, okay? You had the fasting during Ramadan, and you have the pilgrimage or the Hajj to Mecca, okay? So going back to the 3rd pillar, Zakah. Zakah is an obligatory charity that every Muslim man and woman must give every year to people in their community. Now, it is a percentage of not what you earn, but a percentage of what you save. It's 2.5% of your savings is to be given. And this zakat must go towards feeding people in your community. So providing those basic needs, okay, so like food. And of course, the whole goal of zakat is social justice. If you have more, you should give more. If you are already in a state of poverty, then this obligation does not pertain to you. You should be the recipient of this obligation for others. So there's many ways that a Muslim can give to charity, right? You know, one can donate funds towards, let's say, cancer research and other things like that. But that donation cannot be zakat. The zakat money must go towards feeding people. And your family comes first. You're obligated to take care of, you know, let's say the basic food needs of your family, your household, and then it extends outward. So in Islam, we have that notion of social justice embedded right there in the five pillars. And there are some verses of the Quran I just wanted to share with you that really emphasize the notion of social justice that's in the Islamic tradition. So we talked about zakat. In terms of dealing with one another, making decisions for the society, there is a verse in the Quran in Surah 42, ayah number 38. Consult each other when determining affairs. Not one person should make the decisions for the entire community. It should be mutually agreed upon. It should be discussed. There shouldn't be one person, one community, one tribe or whatever making decisions for everybody else. The notion of maybe one particular group of people being more wealthy, so therefore they have more right to determine the affairs of the entire community. No, that does not exist. Another verse in the Quran that I would like to share to you is, let's see, I have it right here. So enjoin what is right and forbid what is evil. And that is from Surah 9, verse 71. And the verse from the Quran that is often quoted that really emphasizes how justice is embedded in the Islamic tradition is Surah number 4, ayah 135. Stand for justice, even if it's against yourself. I'm going to say that again. Stand for justice, even if it's against yourself. So no matter what, standing up for justice, speaking up for those who cannot speak, is paramount. One cannot call themselves a Muslim while they ignore injustices. And even if it's against your own self, and I think that's the most powerful part of that ayah, is that standing for justice is not just calling out somebody else, you know, and you going on thinking that you have nothing to work on in yourself. Even calling yourself out, even publicly, if that's what it takes. So I think that's extremely crucial as we are living in the middle of a pandemic with COVID-19. We are living in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. And of course that his life was one of many many of unarmed Black men and women who have been killed in this country. And our subsequent conversations and meetings and protests that are going on in the Rochester area about justice, you have to begin with yourself. What are we doing every day to examine the biases that we have within ourselves? And we all have them, myself included. What are we doing every day to discover something that we need to change within ourselves? What are we willing to risk of our, of our friends, of our reputation or whatever? What are we willing to put on the line for speaking out for justice of a group of people? And the Quran has many examples of calling, true believers, true Muslims, true people who believe in this message are ones who protect the most vulnerable in society. And when you look at the society of 7th century Arabia, 7th century of the Common Era, in Arabia, the most vulnerable during those times were women, particularly widows, and orphans, and of course, members of the elderly. That they had rights, even though they're vulnerable, they have rights, even though, the Quran was revealed in a time when women, before the revelation of the Quran, had no rights, where orphans had no rights. It all of a sudden gives these groups rights because they have rights to make their decisions and rights to their own happiness as any other person does. So again, that verse in the Quran, stand for justice, even if it's against yourself. And that really brings into the whole Islamic ideal that the society in which you live, your community, the rights of society, the right of the community as a whole takes precedence over your individual rights. And I do believe that that is at the core of all world's religious and spiritual traditions, including Islam. That your obligation comes first to the well-being of your society before your own individual rights. I believe that it is cultures, not religions, not spiritual practices, that have taken that and flipped it around, where individual rights are first and foremost, and then what's going on in the community rights, whatever, what benefits the community as a whole, that comes second, if it comes at all. Our first and foremost obligations are to the well-being of our society, then to ourselves. You cannot stand for justice for your community and say that your own individual rights are paramount to anybody else's. Those things do not coincide, at least in the Islamic tradition. They do not. So another verse of the Quran that really emphasizes the notion of justice is the verse, and I'll share it with you in Arabic and then in English, La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. And not just religion. There is no compulsion in anything. There should be no compulsion in who you vote for. There should be no compulsion in how you're going to live your life. There should be no compulsion in with whom you marry, okay, or what career you want to pursue. Let a person do what they want, and you do what you want. In the end, you're only responsible for your own decisions, and you can't force somebody to comply with your ideas of what the world should be. There is no use to God if somebody is compelled to do something. It has to be genuine. And I think that's also is so intrinsically connected to the notions of justice, is choosing how you believe and how you want to live your life, but at the same time, not make it a daily pursuit to try to change the ideals of somebody else. And so, like I mentioned before, how Muslims get their inspiration, their way of life from the Quran, and then the example of the Prophet. So I shared with you some verses of the Quran that pertain to the notions of justice, and there's really many. I mean, the notion of justice and not slandering people's name in public, the rights to property and things like that it's a pretty common theme throughout the Quran. And so naturally, the Prophet Muhammad is also going to, he also lived out examples of those verses in his daily life. He was a man that often went to different groups within his community to ask their opinion. He was not a person that say, okay, this is it, this is the way it's going to be, and to heck with the rest of you, I'm the prophet and this is the way things are going to go. We have hadith. It was recorded down that he consulted with the women in his community, wanted to hear their thoughts in terms of decision making. And other groups as well. He was often outspoken about the rights of orphans, and that if an orphan were to inherit property, that it shouldn't be confiscated by the adopted parent or guardian. So when we get down to, in terms of racial equity, the most prime example of racial equity, as was exemplified by the Prophet Muhammad, was during his last sermon. So in his last sermon, which was recorded, he knew he was, nearing the end of his life. He wasn't, he was getting older. I believe it was like towards his 50s, 50s into his 60s, at that time, which at that time it was advanced. So this was his farewell address, and it wasn't necessarily a very lengthy address. It was fairly short, at least what was written down. But what was in his address were issues that he knew would still be challenging for humanity. That even though you have this Quran that was now fully revealed by that time, which gave rights to women and orphans and justice and things like that, he knew that it wasn't just going to wipe away these problems. People are still going to either choose to follow this Quranic advice or not. So he included in his last sermon what he felt to be the most pressing issues that was going to face the community before his departure. He included talks about women, that women have rights. Women have rights in the marriage. They have rights over themselves, because he knew that the equality for women, that the existence of misogyny and sexism was still going to plague humanity, even though we have this Quranic message. And also the issues of racism and prejudice, which he knew were still going to plague humanity, and that's why he included it in his final sermon. He says to his followers that an Arab Muslim is no better than a non-Arab Muslim, and a non-Arab Muslim is no better than an Arab Muslim. A black person is no better than a white person, and a white person is no better than a black person. All that it comes down to is one's piety and their good deeds. This was, in my opinion, an extremely groundbreaking call out of racism and the evils and the destruction to our society that racism causes. And he included that in his last sermon. And again, it brings me back to another Quranic verse where God says that he created different nations and tribes, not so that he created different nations and tribes so that we may come to know one another, not that we may despise one another. So for myself, when I am, I've been an outspoken person about the rights of religious minorities, rights of other minorities as well, members of the LGBTQ community, whom I feel have been very strong advocates for members of the Muslim community, and other marginalized groups, because we are all struggling for the same thing, just the way we want to live our lives, the pursuit of our happiness, which really should be, ideally, those are rights given by our, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So when I reflect on the murder of George Floyd and the continued injustices in our society, I do reflect back on the Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad and other people throughout history who have stood for justice. Again, that stand for justice, even if it's against your own self, is extremely important. And that's really the message that I want to leave you here with today. And also in the Quranic tradition, in the Islamic tradition, the notion of justice is intricately connected with the notion of mercy. Each part of the Quran begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Again, it's the emphasis that humanity is flawed. We're going to mess up again and again, but there is always this mercy. There's always this mercy from God that is extended to humanity if we want it. There's also the verse in the Quran that says, after every hardship, there is ease. After every hardship, there is ease. And again, that is tied into God's mercy and the Quranic principles that a true believer is somebody who has sabr, somebody who has patience. That, you meet most people, everybody has a story. Everybody has been through some kind of hardship. Some more than others, of course. And so when I reflect on any hardship that I may experience as a Muslim woman in American society, I try to remember the Quranic ideal that with every hardship there is ease. But one thing I think should be said, and I think this is cross-cultural, we must be careful that we don't use the ideals of patience as a weapon. We should not weaponize patience. That yes, patience is a virtue. Having patience is definitely embedded in the Islamic tradition, and I believe other traditions as well. But when it comes to justice, when it comes to the well-being of your community, when it comes to the well-being and the livelihood, securing the basic human rights for shelter and tranquility, food, access to healthcare. These are basic human rights. And when we see groups of people being continued to be persecuted by the sheer color of their skin, we should not approach that, well, these groups of people need to be patient. The time to change is not now. It'll come eventually. Patience is a virtue. Let's not weaponize patience. The time for justice is always right now. It's always right now. And I think that's what I want to leave with you today. The message I want to leave with you today is stand for justice, even if it's against your own self. And one should not have to be patient when it comes to standing for injustice. The time for justice is always right now. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found what I've reflected on in terms of the Quran and the Islamic tradition to be beneficial to you. And again, thank you so much to the members of the UU Church for your tireless work in this community for justice. It's an honor that I was asked to make this video and to be part of your weekly sermon. Thank you so much.
I invite you to take a deep breath and know that there is a better world we are working for, and we must travel together. Go yonder, and gather the people. Give them not hell, but courage and hope. Give them something of the love you have found here. Tell all the people that love is our home. Amen.